If you've ever dreamed of being at the final table at a world-class poker event, stop dreaming and start watching. Introducing the Masters of the Casino Poker Series. Everything you've ever wanted to know about how to win at top-level poker, and a whole lot of things you've never thought of before. Watch the programs, go out and play, then come back and watch them again and again. You'll find yourself picking up more and more as you continue to grow as a player. And no matter how experienced you are, you can always benefit by being reminded of the things you've forgotten. Now let's join your host, poker expert John Caldwell. John is a strategy and features writer for PokerNews.com, an accomplished author, TV poker show consultant, and is a highly successful tournament player in his own right. So get rid of all the distractions around you and pay attention, because you're about to learn how to become a master at playing positions and calculating odds.
Position is one of the most important parts of your hand in Texas Hold'em, yet it continues to be quite possibly the most underrated strategy element. In combination with calculating your odds of winning each hand, using the power of position is an effective tool to maximize your winnings. Position, or where you are in relation to the dealer button, affects every hand you play or choose not to play. Being on the button, which means you're the dealer for the hand, is considered the best possible position in Hold'em. This is because you will act last in all but the opening betting round. Generally speaking, it is to your advantage to act last because you have the chance to see how everyone else has played their hand before you have to make your decision whether to check, call, raise, or re-raise. Being directly to the left or after the button is generally considered the worst position. But we're going to show you how to play playable hands in this position effectively. We'll discuss winning strategies for each position on the board. Pre-flop, your position is extremely important because position is a crucial element in deciding whether you're going to play the hand. The consequences of being out of position after the flop can give you real problems, even though you have a good hand. So let's begin with pre-flop strategies for early, middle, and late positions. Pre-flop first position is the seat after the big blind because you act first. If either of the blinds stay in, then they become first after the flop. At a 9 or 10 player table, early position pre-flop are the 3 seats to the left of the big blind. After the flop, it depends on how many people are in, and we'll discuss that later. So when you are in pre-flop first position, or under the gun as it's called, or either of these other 2 early position seats, you will often be betting first after the flop, turn, and river. So you need to remember to be very selective with the hands you play from this earliest of early positions. In a typical 9-person game, you should be playing about 1 hand in every 10. Don't get too eager. Let the cards come to you. Hold'em is a game of odds, and eventually the odds say you will get a playable hand, so be patient. If you are holding a big pair in early position, like aces, kings, queens, jacks, or sometimes even 10s, you should raise. The likelihood of you being dealt 2 aces pre-flop is 110 to 1, so when you get them, bet them up. The opportunity to play these hands don't come around too often. You should also raise an early position with large unpaired cards like ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack, whether they're suited or not, king-queen suited, and ace-queen offsuit. With hands like these, it's critical to limit the number of your opponents, as these hands generally only play well against one opponent. One strategy I see more and more of is to limp in with your big pair and hope to get raised so you can re-raise from an early position. I personally wouldn't do this with anything other than aces or kings, but I've seen people do it with as little as 9s. The danger of this strategy is it's becoming widely used, so you really cannot surprise people the way you used to with it. Here's something I find interesting too, because slow playing these big cards is so common now, it's possible to use the fear of this as a bluff technique, meaning you limp in with a marginal hand, hope someone raises, and then re-raise when it gets back around to you, so people think that you were trapping with the big cards and may just fold against your re-raise. It can be a very effective bluff, but if you try it, you'd better do it with a hand that's versatile enough that even if your opponent calls you with a strong opening hand, you still have a good chance to win without having to hit some crazy draw. Typically, you will want to call, not raise, call with lower pairs like 10s through 7s. Also call with suited king jack, queen jack, jack 10, ace 10, and an offsuit king queen. But things change a little if you're in early position and you get raised. You're going to want to reconsider your hand. Pocket aces through jacks, as well as any ace king, are still excellent hands and you need to re-raise accordingly. Still, call with any ace queen, ace jack suited, or pocket 10s. When you're in early position with anything less than a pair of 7s, you should fold. I find this to be a common misstep of many novice players. The pair is so pretty in their hand, they really want to see the flop. The problem with playing small to medium pairs is they're only playable after the flop if you flop a set, something you will do only about 1 in 8 times, which means that 7 out of those 8 times you call that raise, you're simply donating your chips to someone else, unless the pot odds are favorable enough to justify a call, which we'll talk about a little later. Now, when you're in middle position, you should play all of the hands you would have played in early position. With no raise before you, you can also comfortably play pairs down to 5s. I would raise with 9s or higher. If you're fairly certain that the blinds aren't going to just kind of blindly defend their hands at all costs, go ahead and play your pairs of 2s, 3s, and 4s. I recommend raising large cards down to ace jack, king jack, and queen jack suited, ace 10 whether it's suited or not, and king queen offsuit. The general rule of thumb is the more players there are in the pot, the lower your suited connectors can be. So if there are already 3 or 4 players in the pot ahead of you, go ahead and call your suited connectors down to 8, 9. Connectors, whether suited or not, are hands that are drawing hands, which means they need a lot of help to win. And generally, they're most effective in multi-way pots, meaning that there's 3 or 4 or 5 people in the pot, because your lucky flop can pay off big, yet you can still get out pretty cheap when you don't catch it. If there are few or no calls ahead of you in middle position, I would raise when you're holding an ace and any other suited card. This can be effective if an ace falls, but proceed with caution if you don't flop 2 of your suit. Anyone who calls your pre-flop raise could likely have an ace with a bigger kicker. I think it's correct to go ahead and represent the ace and bet out if an ace hits the board. But if you get raised, it's probably time to fold. If you get called, it's definitely time to slow down if you don't have 2 of your suit on the board. When playing a suited king, I wouldn't play the hand unless your suited kicker is a 9 or higher. When you're in middle position and there is already a raise before you, your play will change. While you need to tighten up, you should still be calling with 9s through jacks and large suited connectors. Consider that you may be re-raised if you decide to call a raise that's already on the table, so make sure your hand will stand up. But if the pot has been raised and re-raised behind you, there's bound to be at least one monster hand in there. In this instance, look for any reason to fold. This may not be the best time to test the odds of unsuited connectors. Last position, as previously mentioned, is the best position in Hold'em poker. When there has been no raise behind you in last position, call any pocket pair between 2 and 7, and I would go ahead and raise with anything 8s or higher. You can also call with any 2 large cards, but remember, if you play hands like King Jack, you're going to need to get help on the flop immediately. And remember that any ace with a hand like King Jack, an ace on the board is going to kill your hand. Play suited connectors all the way down to 5-4. You can play suited cards with a 1-card gap in them, but like Jack 9 of clubs. But don't stay in with anything lower than 7-5 suited. And remember, always play cards like Ace-5 suited delicately, realizing again that if your ace does flop, your kicker may not be good. When you're in last position and there's been a raise and even a re-raise, remember to evaluate your cards effectively. Don't necessarily stay in purely because of your position. If it's not a hand you would raise in middle position, certainly don't raise it here. Some people fall in love with last position and attempt to bully from it. Now mind you, this can be a really effective technique, but it must be used selectively. If players begin to see you will bully with marginal hands, they will adjust their play accordingly and they will set you up with open limps and other tactical re-raise plays. As discussed throughout this series, you must mix your game up. If you consistently button bully, it will be a losing strategy for you in the long run. The players of today are too skilled and too experienced not to see through thinly veiled plays executed over and over. Using the power of late position can be a really valuable tool, but only if it's used wisely. There is sometimes an extraordinary advantage to playing in the blinds, whether it be the big blind or the small blind. Keep in mind that when you are playing the blinds, you will be in the worst position after the flop. This is really important to think about. You will have to act first or second. So be aware that the hands you're playing should be evaluated with that in mind. In the small blind with no raise before you, call with any pair, any ace or king, and any 2 suited cards. You can play any unsuited connectors, but I wouldn't play 3-2 or 4-3, as when you hit your hands, oftentimes there's no value in them. But if there's been a raise, keep in mind that you'll be the first person to act after the flop, turn, and river. Forget about the money that you've already put in the pot and play like you're in middle position with a raise behind you. Let me repeat that, it's really important. Forget about the money that you've already put in the pot. Blinds are a cost of doing business and should be viewed as such. If you're going to call a raise from one of the blinds, have a plan before the flop hits. And what I mean by this is, if you're going to call a raise with a specific hand, have a flop you're looking for, or have a plan as to what you're going to do, because guess what? You will be the next person to act after the flop. Even if the plan is to call with trash and bet out if trash hits the board, and we'll talk more about that later. But avoid just calling to see flops from the blinds because you're already partially invested in the pot. There's an expression in business, don't throw good money after bad. Nowhere in poker does that expression hold true more than when you're in the small blind with a 4-7 offsuit. Large pairs and 2 high cards like ace-queen are good enough to play with. But when you're holding a monster pair or even ace-king, re-raising from the small blind is a good play, as people will generally give you credit for having a big hand. Keep in mind, however, that there is one person still left to act, and that's the big blind. Speaking of the big blind, when you're in the big blind, you already have a forced bet into the pot. Hope that you'll have a good enough hand to play, but don't fall into the trap of constantly protecting your big blind bet. Other players will begin to use your zeal in protecting your investment against you. Raise from the big blind with pairs over 8s, large suited cards like ace-king down to king-jack, as well as ace-king, ace-queen, and king-queen offsuit. This raise will hopefully knock out any players who merely limped in hoping to see a flop and get lucky. It will also maybe expose anyone using the limp re-raise technique we discussed earlier. If you have multiple limpers, avoid putting all your chips in from the big blind with anything but the strongest of hands. The way to get away from this limp re-raise play is to make a raise, and if you then get re-raised, unless you put the player on a bluff, you can lay your quality hand down with a clear conscience and still have chips left. I would probably call a raise with any pair or any suited connector, as well as any ace, king, or queen with another suited kicker card. This is a little dependent on your read and the size of the raise. My statement earlier about not calling raises with a small pair diminishes a little when you're in the big blind. If you're getting 4 or 5 to 1 on your money for the pre-flop call, and there are going to be 3 or 4 players in the pot, it's probably correct to go ahead and make the call. Reevaluate your hand if there's already been a raise and a re-raise, especially if the small blind has already folded. Without the small blind, you will become the first player to act after the flop, turn, and river, placing you in a really unfavorable position. If you don't really feel strongly about your hand, get out. So once you've made it through the first betting round, it's time for the flop. Remember that the likelihood that you will flop a pair is only 12%, and the likelihood that that pair will be top pair is even less. So what do you do if you flop nothing at all? Well, it depends on your position. If you are first to act or out of position, then your options are to check or fire a bet in and try to bluff at the pot. If someone behind you bets, get out of the hand. If you're in last position and it's checked around to you, go ahead and fire a bet out if you sense weakness and try to pick up the pot. Don't get caught into a check-raise situation. If you sense weakness, you can go ahead, bet, and try to pick up the pot, but do this judiciously. If opponents see you always firing at everything, they will set you up for a big fall. Check behind them and hope to see a free card that will help you. One of the hardest techniques in poker to master is the discipline involved. But don't be betting into hands because you feel like you're going to get the card you need on the turn or on the river. The old saying goes that the feeling a feel player most often feels is the feeling of his wallet getting lighter. Words to live by. First to act or out of position, go ahead and check, but fold against any bets if you were holding bottom or second pair with a weak kicker, or if you still need 2 more cards to make your straight or flush. If you're last to act, go ahead and bet if you sense weakness from the other players. But be wary of someone who check calls and may be slow playing a big hand against you. Also, remember that people might call you with overcards or drawing cards and draw out on you. Your play will change only slightly if the flop misses you and you're holding 2 overcards. For example, say you stayed in pre-flop with an ace, queen of clubs. The flop doesn't fall so favorably with a 2 of hearts, a 6 of diamonds, and a 10 of spades. This isn't a great flop for you, but you still do have a shot at the pot. Checking here is probably the right play, but if someone bets after you, you probably have to lay your hand down here. If you're first to act, you can consider firing a bet in. See, the bad thing about being in early position is you have to act first, but the good thing about being in early position is you get to act first. And what I mean by that is, where you will have to endure decisions made after you, when you act strong early, a lot of times you can take pots down, especially if the flop is real weak, like the example I just talked about. Betting here is clearly a semi-bluff, something that can take the pot down or wind up blowing up in your face. Don't ever commit a large portion of your chips to a move like this. And again, This is not a play that you can make over and over and over again. People will start to smell a rat and look you up. If you've been playing solid, tight, aggressive poker, you can get away with this type of a play now and again. If you get raised making a play like this, you probably need to get away from the hand quickly. Again, if there's a bet before you and all you have is 2 overcards with no draws, folding is probably the correct play. It most likely will be saving you money. Keep in mind that I only recommend you play drawing hands that are either open-ended straight draws, where you are drawing to the top end of the straight, a nut flush draw, or a flush draw with at least 1 very high card. Drawing hands that can actually benefit from being first to act. You can bet out strongly with that hand and hope to chase out your opponents, or at least build a pot so that if you do draw out, you can pile up those winning chips. Always remember, any drawing hand is not a made hand. So anytime you make this play, you're taking a calculated risk. Always keep in mind the players you are playing and whether they're the type of players who will call any bet if they have a decent hand, or if they're the type of players that can be driven out by an aggressive early bet. If you are in last position, you might want to check your drawing hand. This will allow you to see the free card that might make your draw. If you bet in last position, many players with a good hand will call, thinking that you're making a position bet, and you can lose more than you should have if your hand doesn't draw out. If you are in early position and flop top pair, bet it up. As long as no trouble card hits the turn, you should probably fire out another bet. Again, using the early position to act strong. Just be careful and don't get caught up in a big pot with top pair weak kicker, as somebody may be allowing you to bet their hand for them so they can hide the strength of their hand and then trap you later. If you're in late position and it's checked to you, bet your pair. If you're in late position and someone bets before you, consider raising him. More likely than not, anyone else left in the pot other than the person who bet will fold, leaving you to go one-on-one. The great thing about raising is you find out with near certainty where you are in the hand. If someone flat calls your raise, chances are you are up against a hand. If someone re-raises you and you have a good but not a great hand, chances are you're beat, and you can find out now rather than on the next street. Look at it this way. If you flat call a bet versus raising, but you're willing to call the same bet on the next street, you're actually out the same amount of chips in either scenario. But with the raise scenario, it will be much more likely that you will know where you stand in the hand. Plus, remember, the nice thing about raising is, oftentimes your opponents will fold. Another thing to think about is even if your opponent does call your bet, it is possible he will check to you next time, enabling you to see a free card if that fits your strategy for the hand. Occasionally, you will flop a hand like 2 pair, top pair with a strong kicker, or a flush or straight draw, maybe even a set. These are all very strong hands, but depending on the other cards on the flop, they may hold possibilities for another player to have or draw out to a better hand. These are often make or break hands in a tournament and can cost you lots of chips unless you play them really well. If you're in early position, you bet out right away, and if you get raised, Or if more than one re-raise comes after your initial bet, you might consider someone got lucky on you and flopped a better made hand. Don't get trapped. Again, your two pair will have only a 9% chance of making it to a full house to beat your opponent. No matter how great your hand looks, if you believe your opponent who has raised you, get out. Hold'em can get more challenging after the flop because really anything can and will happen. You know what you have right now, but how can you be sure that your cards have the best chance of ending up the winning hand? Besides analyzing your opponent's game for telltale signs of bluffing, which we'll cover in its entirety in another video, by the way, you need to learn how to read the board to calculate possible hands that your opponent may have and count your own outs. An out is a card that will improve your hand to the point that you believe you will then have the best hand if that card comes up. The first thing to keep in mind is that after the flop, you have seen only 5 cards. The 2 cards in your hand and the 3 cards on the board. That means you are looking to catch your outs amongst the 47 cards that you haven't seen yet. For instance, say you're holding a 6-5 of clubs and the flop has come 4 of hearts, 3 of spades, 10 of diamonds. You are guaranteed the best hand on the turn with any of the 4 remaining 7s in the deck or any of the 4 remaining 2s in the deck, because you make the nut straight with these 2 cards. So this particular hand has 8 outs. Many people think that the fact that there are 8 cards left in the deck to give them the absolute best hand means that they have good odds and should bet the heck out of it. Not the case. Remember, if you believe that you need to make your straight to win the hand, 8 outs that will make it, guess what? There's also 39 cards in the deck that won't. Even if a 5 or a 6 comes off and gives you a pair, remember that there's still a 10 on the board. And presumably your opponent has stayed in the hand this long, he's got something. So you can most likely assume that your pair of 5s or 6s won't hold up. When you look at it this way, you begin to realize just how risky it is to stay in with drawing hands. 8 cards to win, 39 cards to lose. Don't be afraid to bet and play drawing hands, but remember that a drawing hand is always behind a made hand. Even if the made hand is a pair of deuces, you're still behind. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're holding an ace-5 offsuit, and the flop comes 3, 4, king. Any of the 4 remaining 2s in the deck will give you a straight, and any of the 3 remaining aces in the deck will give you top pair. However, let's say your opponent has been betting like crazy and you think he might have just flopped a set on you. If this is the case, then your only hope is to get one of the deuces in the deck to win this particular hand. On the other hand, if you put your opponent on top pair and your aces are still alive, you need to include those 3 aces when calculating your outs. Your position relative to the button should also be taken into account. If you're holding a hand with fewer outs, it's only worthwhile for you to stay in the pot if there's little chance of a raise after you. The better your position, the less likely a raise will occur, thus increasing the value of your hand. Of course, determining your own outs is not always that obvious because you're not always looking for the best hand you could make. You're just looking for a hand that's better than what your opponent probably has. These are times when you want to figure out how many outs you have against all possibilities of what your opponent could have. Now follow me here, this is kind of a complex example. For example, say you're holding the ace of diamonds and the queen of clubs. The player right before you bets. You raise, he calls. The flop comes ace of hearts, 8 of clubs, and 5 of spades. Your opponent checks. You bet and he raises. What do? Do you fold? You call his raise? Let's examine what possible hands would beat you. You're probably going to put him on a pair of aces, maybe something like ace-king, 2 pairs, ace-8, ace-5, something like that. You're probably not going to put him on 8-5 since he raised before the flop. He could even be holding pocket aces, pocket eights, or pocket fives. So that means there are 2 aces, 4 kings, 3 eights, and 3 fives that are still left unaccounted for in the deck. Now follow me here. This means your opponent could have ace king 8 ways, ace 8 and ace 5 6 different ways, pocket eights and pocket fives 3 ways each, and pocket aces 1 way. Now that we have determined that, let's determine your outs against all of the possible hands. You have 3 outs to beat ace king, that is, if any of the 3 remaining queens come off. You have 3 outs to beat ace 8, with also any 3 of the remaining queens. You have 6 outs to beat his ace 5, which is any of the 3 remaining 8s in the deck, or any of the 3 remaining queens in the deck. You're drawing dead against pocket aces. You have 1 out against pocket 8s, and 2 outs against pocket 5s. Of course, you won't be able to pull out your calculator in the middle of the game to figure out your hidden outs. But be aware of hands like ace 5, which you can beat 6 different ways. Basically, all this information we just figured out boils down to an average of about 3 outs against all of the possible hands that he could have. Depending on how much money is in the pot, 3 outs might not be enough for you to call the re-raise. But this does lead me to another valuable concept in Texas Hold'em, which is determining your pot odds. In a nutshell, pot odds are the amount of money already in the pot compared to how much money you must call to stay in the hand. So basically, if there's $100 in the pot and you have to pay $20, you're getting pot odds at 5 to 1. In our previous example where you had only 3 outs in the hand, 5 to 1 pot odds would not be sufficient for you to make that call. You should have at least 1 chance in 5 of winning the hand to justify you putting $20 into this $100 pot, or a chance to win that is equal or better than your expected payoff. This is a huge, really important concept, so I'll repeat it. Compare how much money is in the pot and the size of the bet that you are risking with the odds that you're going to make the best hand for sure. That is the most conservative and absolute best way to play long-term winning poker. The percentages just do not lie, and over the long run, you will win more and lose less. If you prefer to take chances, that's okay. Just be aware that you are taking chances, and don't keep thinking that you're losing because you're just getting unlucky. Determining your pot odds in the middle of the gameplay exactly to the number is nearly impossible. Your ability to compute pot odds comes only with experience and learning the basic odds of hands like pairs, trips, straights, and flushes. By knowing your outs against common hands, you can more accurately determine pot odds on the spot. Let me first show you how you can figure out the odds that you will receive a certain hand. Say you're holding ace king and the flop comes 2 queen jack. To get a pair, you have 6 outs, since there are 3 aces and 3 kings to your knowledge left in the 47 remaining unseen cards in the deck. The odds of you getting either a pair of aces or a pair of kings on the turn is 47 to 3, which is about 6% each. However, with this same hand, you also have a 12 to 1 chance of drawing the straight, because all of the 4 10s are still potentially in the deck, which is about an 8.5% chance. So now you can combine these odds, not average them, combine them. 3 outs plus 3 outs plus 4 outs, which gives you 10 outs against the 47 remaining cards, which is about 4.7 to 1, or a 6% chance that aces, a 6% chance that kings, and an 8% chance that any of the 4 remaining 10s will fall, or about 20% odds that you will draw the highest pair or the straight. If you feel like pair of aces or a straight will win you the hand, then you would be correct to place that same $20 in the pot if the pot was $100, like we just talked about a few moments ago, since the 4.7 to 1 odds you have of making your hand are better odds than the 5 to 1 you're putting into the pot. The key to this strategy is being accurate to what kind of a hand it will take to win the pot. If you think your hand would be good if you make it, but you're wrong, this will cost you a lot of money. Your position is still just as important before the flop as it is after the flop, because where you are in relation to the dealer button may increase or decrease the pot odds you'll be getting. If you are in first position and you bet $20 into the same $100 pot we've been playing with, there is a chance that you will be re-raised behind you, which will lower your odds. For instance, let's say there are 6 players, including you, and you're in first position. After the flop, there's $100 in the pot and you go ahead and bet out 20 bucks. The second player folds, the third player calls, the fourth and fifth player both fold, and the last person re-raises an additional $40. But if you call this bet, your odds have decreased to about 4.1 to 1, significantly less than what they were when you put in that initial $20 bet. Is it still worth it? Remember to calculate your odds and your outs. Don't get caught up in the emotion of the hand. If you have very few outs or are drawing dead, that means there is absolutely no card in the deck that will help you win. Obviously, you got to get out. One concept I want to explore, which I think is one of the more poorly applied concepts in poker, is the concept of implied odds. Implied odds are the odds you could attach to the hand by assuming and including bets on later streets into your pot odds calculation. For example, let's say you are about 6 to 1 to make your hand, and right now the pot is only giving you about 3 to 1 to make this particular call. Indeed, you do not have the pure pot odds to call this bet at this time. However, if you included bets on the next street and included them in your calculation, you could get your odds up to 7 or 8 to 1. Making a call correct here. I've spoken to many players who, in my opinion, put too much weight on implied odds. Basically, they talk themselves into making a poor call in the hand because they want the action and they want to gamble. The inherent flaw in taking the concept of implied odds too far, in my opinion, is you can't see into the future and you don't know what your opponent is going to do. So to include some kind of knowledge, whether real or perceived, into a hard calculation about whether to make a call could wind up getting you in a ton of trouble. Mind you, I do think implied odds have a place and serve a big purpose, but I think they are the most value when your decision is a close call. The concept of implied odds shouldn't be used to talk yourself into calling too many loose bets. In addition, remember that implied odds also contain implied costs. Calculate how much you might be risking on a hand you are unsure of, not just to stay in to see another card, but also what it might cost you to get that card when you're not sure that it will give you the best hand. Texas Hold'em is a game of strategy and a game of skill. One of the most important things to remember is it takes practice. You will have to lose some money to win some. Don't assume because you have a few lucky sessions that you're just a natural. No player wins every time he or she plays, and if you find someone who says they win every time, don't buy any swampland from them. On the flip side, you are going to have bad days too, but don't give up. Even the pros say they are still learning and mastering the game of poker every day. Whether you are playing for fun or playing for real money, the discipline is the same. Good luck to you in your games.